Remember the Fallen is an archive of stories from your ancestors. These stories have been submitted from around the world, and today, once again, we will be listening to the memoirs of those that served in the deadliest and most costly conflict in human history, the Second World War. Their memories will never fade. My grandpa was a gunner in an M18 Hellcat, and well, let's just say the tank in front of him got hit with a Panzerfaust, and he saw the loader crying for help while he was crawling out, burning to death, and shot himself because no one would help him. Shortly after that, they hit a mine and blew up the track, but don't worry, they fixed it after 2 hours. Later that night, while he was going back to base camp, they saw a few German tanks with 30 to 40 men behind them. The other Hellcats didn't see them until his commander spotted them and called them out. He said it was a fiery hell. Keep in mind he had 20 men behind him. After that happened, only 8 men came back alive. So one tank, a Sherman, got hit, and the other Sherman got hit with the anti-tank rifle. No one else was hurt, and that was it after that. It was just Germans crawling everywhere. My great-grandfather didn't have the same experience. He was a T-34 driver, and God knows how, but he served and survived from 1941 till the end of the war, and fought at both Stalingrad and Berlin. From what I know, none of the crew died. Not gonna lie, must have been one hell of a journey though. He suffered from hearing injuries and had PTSD, and as time passed by, he has more or less lost his mind. My great-grandfather served in World War II as an American sailor, stationed upon the USS Indianapolis, and was involved in what is considered one of the worst naval disasters to ever occur. For those of you who haven't heard of it, I seriously suggest you look into it, for it's an amazing story. Out of the 316 who survived, my great-grandfather was one of them. Sadly, I honestly don't know much of anything other than the fact that when he came back, he was completely mentally broke. He had some serious mental issues because of it, all the way up till he eventually took his own life a few years after the war. The other thing that I know is that he had something to do with anti-aircraft on the ship. I apologize, but I know nothing more about it. My uncle was 101st Airborne. He saved a squad from an enemy grenade and got a medal for it. My granddad served in the Wehrmacht in a heavy rocket artillery battalion. I don't know much about his time during the war, just that he was in Caen, France, and Russia. He got promoted to an officer and received the Iron Cross. He once wrote that World War II was the best time of his life. He was a Nazi. He believed in all that propaganda shit. That's all I know from my grandma. My great-grandfather was the leader of 2 Sherman battle groups, and 2 times he was the sole survivor of the groups. He suffered heavily from survivor's guilt. My grandfather was a child in World War II, and then I asked him about his tale, and he repeats the same 2 stories, and every other tale is from after the war. When I asked him why, not much else happened, or something like that. When I asked my mom about it, she said that she got him drunk enough one night, and he told her why. He saw how a group of soldiers, probably Russian, raped and killed a young woman. They broke every bone in her body and left her to die, and that scarred him for life. My great-opa was a German communications officer during the Second War and was the one who sent the last message to the Bismarck, telling them that they were all going to get promoted, but he sent it unencrypted so the Allies knew. Sorry for your loss. I know what happened to the battlecruiser HMS Hood. My great-grandpa was in the 82nd Airborne, with his job as a glider pilot and co-pilot. On Operation Market Garden, the pilot told my great-grandpa to sit in the back to balance out the craft. The glider crashed into a ditch, and only him and 2 other soldiers survived, and later surrendered to the Wehrmacht soldiers. He spent the rest of the war as a POW in the Stalag 13. He died in 2014, on a Thursday, from a heart attack in his sleep, at the old age of 97. I'm an American. On the opposite side, my grandfather was also in the Pacific. Even though they were enemies, they were still human beings. I thank and respect your grandfather, and I thank and respect mine. I wish you a safe, good day. My grandfather fought as a rebel against Japanese during their occupation in the Philippines. My grandfather also served in World War II. He was an M10 crewman and lost his leg when an artillery shell landed near him. My great-grandfather served in the Croatian army in the fight against the 3 factions, Setniks, Italians, and Nazi forces. He mostly served in the fight against the Italian forces. He even has a picture of the fighter pilot who flew a Spitfire. The pilot provided support for the Allied bombers, and believe it or not, the entire region of Dalmatia is littered with remnants of shot-down aircraft. There's even a village that is entirely built by military bombers. My great-uncle was a bomber interceptor pilot, flew the FW-190, then when it came out, the TA-152. I read his journal, and he recounts one time when he just felt sick to the stomach because there were bombers over his family's houses he couldn't afford to miss. He flew over the bomber, dove down, and missed. With his family's lives at stake, he turned his nose to the plane and rammed it with his wing. He survived till the end of the war. My great-grandfather was a conductor of a wounded train in Greece in 1945. They were attacked by partisans. The partisans blew the tracks in front of and behind the train and lied down on one side of the train. In a fight over a group of sheep as they were really hungry, he was hit by a very sharp saber under his rib, and when he was healed, the war was over. He died a few years before I was born. Since I never knew him, I can't say if he wants me to share all of this, but I honestly believe he wasn't a Nazi, and from what my mom and dad say, he and his wife were great people. My grandfather fought at Iwo Jima and was one of the soldiers to raise a flag over the summit of the mountain. My great-grandfather served in the Essex-class carrier Antietam. He would secretly feed the Japanese prisoners and treated them like actual human beings. Rest in peace, Ralph. Fly high. My great-grandfather was a U.S. Army fighter pilot. He fought the Germans in the sky. My great-uncle was an Army medic in the Pacific. Both did their part, and I wish to do mine. My grandfather was a 20-year-old drafty radio operator in the Luftwaffe. That's all we know. No idea exactly or how he died, just one of many useless deaths. My grandfather was a soldier in the Polish army shortly before the fall. He was then taken prisoner and put in a death camp where he survived and died at 89. My dad's uncle was in the Canadian Army and got captured and then saved by the American Army. My grandfather was in the 6th Army. He survived Stalingrad and Russian captivity and was among the few unlucky to return to his family in the mid-50s. He lived out the rest of his life in peace. My grandfather, a Korean veteran, said his favorite quote about the war and the difference with the wars after World War II was, "World War II, we were fighting people putting other people in ovens, while nowadays, we're fighting a farmer with sandals who just wants to live his life." My dad was Jimmy 1 on a troop ship, full of troops being evacuated from the battlefield. With the ship bombed and sinking and the captain killed, he dropped his stern kedge anchors and ran the ship aground. The Royal troops fought their way to safety and were eventually taken off by a Royal Navy destroyer. Alright, and that will be it for this episode. Thank you guys for listening, and huge thanks for those who shared their family stories with us. If you would like us to cover your ancestor's story from World War II, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and next time we'll try to include yours in the video as well. Now, if you enjoyed this, please like the video and subscribe for new uploads. We'll be uploading weekly and probably going into many more stories in the near future. So, until then, I'll see you next time.